In the far-off land of Obwanda, hidden behind the misty hills and deep green forests, there was a name that chilled every heart: Chief Gahero. He was not just a man, he was a legend, a storm wrapped in human skin. The villagers spoke his name only in whispers, as if saying it too loud would summon him. People said he ruled like thunder, striking hard and without warning. When he gave orders, they were followed without question, for disobedience often ended in pain or silence, sometimes forever. Gahero was tall and fierce, with eyes as cold as a river in winter. He never smiled, he never laughed. His voice rumbled like the earth during a storm, and his fists had ended many lives. He was said to have crushed rebellions with one glance, turned friends into traitors with fear alone, and silenced a whole village in one terrifying night. No one really knew how much of it was true, but no one dared to test the stories either. In Obwanda, truth didn't matter, fear did, and fear was what Gahero ruled with. His fortress sat on the highest hill, surrounded by thick stone walls, and guarded by warriors who never spoke unless spoken to. The gates never opened unless he commanded it. People who went in didn't always come out. The land below his mountain was quiet, not because it was peaceful, but because everyone was too afraid to make a sound. Children were warned from a young age, stay in line, or Gahero will come for you. Even grown men, strong and proud, lowered their eyes when his name was mentioned. Gahero had no wife, no children, no softness around him. It was as if he had banished love and laughter from his life long ago. His days were spent sharpening swords, training warriors, and making decisions that made his people both safe and terrified. Many believed he had no heart at all, only stone where it used to beat. People said he had once been human, but something dark had stolen his soul, leaving only a shell built on anger, pain, and war. But life is strange. Destiny is quiet, but powerful, and one day, everything began to change. Her name was Lulami, a girl from a small village, pure-hearted, gentle-eyed, so soft, so innocent. No one would ever imagine her name and Gahero's in the same sentence. But fate has a wild way of weaving stories. No one saw it coming. Not the villagers, not the warriors, not even Gahero himself. But the moment she entered his world of shadows, something unseen began to stir. And slowly, the stone heart everyone feared began to crack. In the quiet village of Koyenda, life moved with caution. People spoke in hushed tones, as though the trees themselves could carry their voices up the hills to Chief Gahero's ears. Smiles were rare. Laughter, if it came at all, was short and nervous. Children played, but not too loudly. Markets were busy, but never cheerful. Every home lived under the shadow of one name, Gahero. Mothers didn't need monsters in bedtime stories. They had a real one. Be good, or Gahero will come, they'd whisper, and the children would shiver and fall asleep without a word. Everyone knew he watched. Somehow, he always knew what happened in the village. He was like a ghost made of fire and thunder. No one ever saw him, yet his presence was heavy, like a cloud full of lightning, waiting to strike. His warriors would come and go in silence, tall, masked, cold, and when they arrived, fear walked with them. Then one day, something happened that froze every heart in Koyenda. The chief's guards appeared in the center of the village, their armor glinting under the sun, faces unreadable. Villagers stopped in their tracks. Mothers pulled their children close. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. One guard stepped forward and announced in a voice as sharp as a blade, "Chief Gahero seeks a wife, and he has chosen Lulami, daughter of Tandilo the farmer." The words struck like thunder. For a moment, the village stood still. Then, like dry leaves in a gust of wind, gasps swept across the crowd. Lulami? That Lulami? The same gentle girl who helped deliver goatlings? The one who braided her hair with flowers and sang to trees? The girl who wrapped broken bird wings in cloth and prayed over injured calves? She was only 19, quiet, kind, and full of light. She had never raised her voice, never disobeyed her parents, never asked for anything beyond a peaceful life in her father's field. But now her life had been claimed. No one cheered, no one clapped, because no one saw it as an honor. To be chosen by Chief Gahero was not a blessing. It was a sentence, a silent one, a forever one. And no one, no matter how strong or wise or brave, had ever dared say no to him. People who said no didn't live long enough to say anything again. Tandilo stood frozen. His mouth opened, but no words came. His wife, Adanda, clutched her chest, tears already forming in her eyes. And Lulami, she just stood there, eyes wide, a soft wind lifting the edge of her dress, not running, not crying, just still, like the calm before a storm. The village watched, helpless. They knew there was nothing to be done. Gahero had spoken, and Lulami's fate had just changed forever. The day of Lulami's departure felt like the sky itself had forgotten how to shine. Clouds hung low over Koyenda, and the wind whispered like it was morning. Inside their small home, Lulami's mother wept silently, clutching her daughter's favorite shawl, the one she used to wear when she danced in the fields. Her tears soaked the cloth, but she said nothing more. Her cries had already become dry from the night before. Her father, Tandilo, stood outside, fists clenched and eyes locked on the earth beneath his feet, as though he could will it to open and swallow him whole. His heart broke with every breath. But what could he do? Gahero's word was final. Not even the gods dared defy it. And yet, in the middle of all that grief, stood Lulami. Her hands trembled, her eyes were glassy, but she stood tall. She wore a simple white cloth wrapped around her, a sign of purity and peace. Her long braids flowed down her back like rivers of calm. She looked at her parents with gentle strength, holding her tears tightly behind her soft brown eyes. "If I am to go," she said softly, "I will go with peace in my heart." No one could speak after that. There were no words left that hadn't already been cried out or whispered into the night. The chief's guards lifted her onto a tall black horse, and with slow, steady steps, the journey began. Through the quiet village, through the pathless woods, through the heavy silence that thickened the closer they came to Gahero's mountain. By the time they reached the fortress, the sky had turned deep grey. The mountain stood like a giant watching the world below, and at its peak sat the place everyone feared, the stone palace of Chief Gahero. The great wooden doors groaned as they opened, revealing a world of shadows. No music, no welcome, just cold silence and eyes. Dozens of them. Warriors lined the walls, stiff as statues. Servants peered from corners, too afraid to breathe too loudly. All eyes turned to Lulami as she stepped inside. She didn't lower her gaze. She walked slowly, each step echoing through the hall like a soft drumbeat. Her heart pounded, but she moved forward, past the guards, past the servants, into the belly of the beast. And there, at the end of the long, dark hall, stood the legend himself, Chief Gahero. He was even taller than the stories told, his shoulders broad, his arms heavy with strength and scars. His skin was dark and worn like old leather, his eyes glowing like embers in the dark. His face held no smile, only the deep lines of pain and war. He looked like a man carved from the mountain itself, and in a voice like gravel sliding down a cliff, he spoke just 4 words: "You belong to me now." There was no joy when Lulami became the wife of Chief Gahero. No drums beat in celebration. No villagers came to sing or bless the union. No feast filled the air with delicious smells. It was a marriage wrapped in silence, sealed with a vow whispered under the weight of fear. The guards stood by like shadows, the cold wind creeping through the stone halls. And just like that, she was no longer Lulami the daughter, Lulami the dreamer. She was now the wife of a man feared by all, in a fortress where no heart dared to hope. That night, after the hushed ceremony, she was led to a small room deep inside the fortress. It had no windows, only stone walls that kept the light out and the cold in. A thin mat lay on the floor, and beside it, a clay pot of water. There were no flowers, no warmth, no welcome. Chief Gahero never came to that room in the way Lulami had feared. He did not raise a hand to her. He did not try to break her spirit, but he also did not smile. He did not ask how she felt. He barely spoke, except to give sharp commands or nod in silence. His presence filled the halls like thunderclouds, loud even in quiet. She was alone, but Lulami did not cry loudly into the night. She did not break. She whispered prayers in the darkness, songs her mother taught her, soft, healing melodies meant to calm her heart. She sang not for attention, but for peace, for courage. When the maids came with food or blankets, she whispered, "Thank you." Even though they rarely met her eyes, she spoke kindly to them. Her light remained gentle, even in a place built on fear. And every morning, she rose before the sun, folded her mat, and waited in the hall with her hands respectfully clasped. When Gahero passed by, dressed in black robes and silent as ever, she bowed slightly and greeted him with, "Good morning, my husband." He never answered, but Lulami noticed things. While others feared the blood on his sword, she saw something deeper in his eyes, something tired, something sad. His voice was hard, but never cruel. His hands, though rough and calloused, never moved toward her in anger. He kept distance, like a man who had built walls around his heart and didn't know how to tear them down. Each day passed slowly, like a stone rolling uphill. Yet Lulami stayed calm. Her heart did not turn cold. She didn't know what her place in this fortress truly was yet, but she was watching, listening, learning. Something about Chief Gahiro was hidden, buried under years of pain and silence. And though he hadn't said a word to her with kindness, she had already begun to see what no one else could. Days turned into weeks inside the cold fortress. And still, Lulami saw no warmth from her husband. Chief Gahiro remained a silent shadow, watching from afar, but never truly near. The walls of the fortress were like a cage, thick with sorrow and silence. But Lulami refused to wither. She began tending to the old garden that had been forgotten for years, where weeds had overtaken the beauty. With bare hands, she dug into the soil, pulling out thorns and planting new life. Slowly, green returned. Flowers peeked through the cracks like shy children. It was the first color the fortress had seen in years. She used crushed berries and herbs to paint on the grey stone walls, simple symbols of birds, trees, stars, and peace. The guards didn't know what to make of it. They stared from a distance, whispering among themselves, puzzled by this soft girl who acted as though she were in a home, not a prison. Then came the day that changed everything. While walking near the front gates, Lulami heard whimpering. Outside the entrance lay a wounded dog, thin and bleeding, ribs sticking out, eyes full of fear. Without thinking, she ran to it. The chief's men shouted, raising their spears, trying to chase it away. But Lulami stood between them and the animal, arms spread wide. "If you harm him," she said, with a trembling but firm voice, "you harm me." Her words struck like lightning. The soldiers froze. No one had ever spoken like that, not to the chief's guards. From above, Gahiro watched silently from his balcony, his face hidden behind shadows. He said nothing. He made no move. But that night, something unexpected happened. The dog, freshly bathed and bandaged, was brought into the fortress by 2 servants. It was given a place to sleep and fed meat from the chief's own table. Everyone was stunned. No one dared question it, but all eyes turned to Lulami. She had done something no warrior had achieved. She had changed something in Gahiro. And then came the quietest miracle of all. The next morning, as the sun peeked through the mountains, Lulami stepped out of her room and found a small item placed carefully on her door. It was a golden comb, finely carved, shining softly in the light. A gift. No note, no voice. Just that. Her breath caught in her throat. Gahiro had not spoken with words. But in that gesture, he had spoken something louder than any shout. He had noticed her. He had heard her. For the first time, Lulami's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of something warmer, hope. Something inside the fortress had shifted, something inside the chief too, and it had begun with kindness. At first it was barely noticeable, just a shift in the wind, a little less coldness in the air, but for Lulami it was everything. Chief Gahiro, the man who ruled with iron and fear, began appearing more often. He didn't speak, he didn't smile. But he stood beside her in the garden, hands behind his back, watching her as she worked, watching her hum little songs to the plants, whisper to the flowers as though they were her children. He saw how the birds flew near her, how even the wild things trusted her gentleness. He never interrupted her. He just stayed. Then came the morning that changed something deep between them. Lulami was kneeling by the garden bed, brushing dirt gently from a growing flower. The sun hit her face just right, and she smiled. Not for anyone, just for herself. Gahiro was standing close, silent as always. But that smile must have pierced something inside him, because out of nowhere, he asked a question. "Why do you smile?" he said, his voice low and heavy like thunder. "When there is so much sorrow in this world." The question hung in the air, like smoke. Lulami looked up at him, eyes soft, voice even softer. "Because if I do not smile," she replied, "who will teach sorrow how to be soft?" Her words were like sunlight breaking through years of storm clouds. Gahiro looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the mighty chief, feared by all, became just a man. His lips trembled, his eyes shimmered, and for the first time in 20 years, a tear slipped down his scarred cheek. It was not loud, it was not dramatic, but it was real. Lulami didn't speak again. She didn't need to. She simply continued tending to the soil, letting her silence comfort him more than words ever could. Gahero stayed there, standing still, lost in thought, as though her answer had cracked open a memory he had long buried, as though her kindness had reached a part of him even war could not touch. From that day, the fortress began to feel different, not yet warm, but less cold, less heavy. Gahero still wore his armor, still gave sharp commands, but now he lingered longer by Lulami's side. He began to walk slower when she spoke, and once, just once, he reached out to gently pull a leaf from her hair. The man who had built walls thicker than stone had begun to let a little light in, all because one girl dared to smile through the sorrow. It began with a chuckle, a sound so strange, so unfamiliar, that even Lulami paused in shock. Gahero had been watching her feed the birds, and one of them had stolen a seed from her palm and flown off, leaving her startled. She gasped and laughed, and then he did too. Not loud, not open, but a low rumble deep in his chest. It was the sound of stone softening, and it didn't stop there. In the days that followed, Gahero began sitting beside her during meals. He didn't bark orders or brood in silence. He asked questions, simple ones at first, about plants, about the dog she had rescued, about songs she used to sing as a child. He even tried to join in once when she was humming a tune. He moved stiffly, awkwardly, like a soldier trying to dance. But Lulami laughed with joy, and that made him smile. Yes, Chief Gahero smiled. The fortress itself started changing. The cold grey walls that had once echoed only with commands were now alive with colour. Lulami painted them with berry dyes and flower prints, and no one stopped her. The servants, once too afraid to meet her eyes, began smiling back. Some even helped her plant a new garden. The guards, once stiff and silent, joked among themselves. The dog she'd rescued roamed freely, often curling up beside Gahero like an old friend. Word reached the village. Whispers filled the air. Children played louder, unafraid. Elders gathered in corners asking each other, "Is it true? Has the beast grown a heart?" Hope flickered like a candle in the wind. For the first time in years, Obwanda was breathing easier, but not all hearts welcomed peace. Among Gahero's inner circle were men forged in blood and battle, warriors who had followed him through years of conquest, men who thrived on fear, who built their power through terror. They saw the change and called it weakness. They saw Lulami's soft eyes and called her poison. In dark corners of the fortress, they whispered, "He's forgetting who he is," one growled. "The beast has become a pet," another spat. They remembered the Gahero who crushed rebellion with one hand, the Gahero who didn't laugh, didn't feel, didn't smile. They missed the monster who kept them powerful, and so they began to plot, not just against Lulami, but against Gahero himself. They believed if they could break her, if they could remind Gahero of his rage, they could bring the monster back, because they didn't want peace. They wanted power, and they were willing to do anything to get it, even if it meant spilling innocent blood. The rain poured like the sky was weeping, and thunder rolled through the mountains as if the spirits themselves were restless. Inside the fortress, the fire cracked in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Lulami sat close to Gahero, her fingers softly weaving through the fur of the dog lying beside them. She turned her gaze to the man beside her, the one the world called a beast, yet whose eyes now held a flicker of something fragile. "Why did you become so feared?" she asked, her voice no louder than the wind outside. For a moment, silence held its breath. Then Gahero looked into the fire, and his face changed. Not with anger, not with pride, but with pain, a deep, quiet pain that had waited years for someone to listen. He began to speak. When Gahero was just a boy, his village was a peaceful place, full of music and the scent of roasted yams in the air. He had a mother who sang while grinding grain, and a little sister who chased butterflies through the fields. But one night, warriors from a rival land came. They burned homes, looted everything, and showed no mercy. He remembered hiding under a canoe as his mother screamed. He saw her dragged and set aflame. He watched his sister cry as they took her away. He was too small to fight, too weak to save anyone. He survived, alone. And that night, he made a vow. "I killed love," he said, his voice rough with old wounds, because love was the doorway through which pain came. "I built a heart of stone, so no one could ever use love to break me again." Tears did not fall, not at first, but Lulami reached out and gently took his hand in hers. So small, so soft against his rough, scarred fingers. The same hands that had ended battles now trembled in hers. "Then let me teach your heart how to live again," she whispered, her voice steady, her eyes warm like a sunrise after years of darkness. And in that moment, Gahero, chief of thunder, slayer of rebellion, the feared monster of Obwanda, leaned into her arms and wept, not like a warrior, not like a chief, but like the little boy who had lost everything and never had a chance to grieve. He cried for his mother, he cried for his sister, he cried for the years he lived without feeling. And Lulami didn't say a word, she just held him, letting her silence speak the words he needed most. "You are not alone anymore." In the stillness after the storm, something powerful happened, not in war, not in conquest, but in the quiet breaking of a hardened soul. Gahero was no longer just feared, he was beginning to be healed. It was a night darker than most, as if the moon itself had turned its face away. The fortress lay silent under the blanket of stars, but danger moved in the shadows. Gahero's old comrade, Kando, once his brother in battle, led a secret group of warriors who had grown restless. They whispered that Gahero had gone soft, that love had made him weak. They believed Lulami was the cause of it all, and so they decided to strike where it would hurt the most, her. The rebels crept through the fortress like snakes, silent and sharp. They stormed Lulami's room, pulling her from sleep. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. Her feet were bare on the cold floor, but her eyes burned with quiet strength as they dragged her into the great hall. Kando stood before her, sword drawn, his face twisted with fury and confusion. He expected fear, he expected tears, but Lulami stood tall. "If you kill me," she said, her voice calm and steady, "you win nothing. But if you leave me, you'll see what love can do." The warriors hesitated, her words cut deeper than any blade. Still, Kando raised his sword. That's when a roar shook the walls. Gahero burst into the hall like a storm, eyes wild, voice thundering. The guards, who remained loyal, ran behind him, but before the clash of steel could begin, Lulami stepped forward and raised her hand. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice echoing like a bell through the fortress. She stood between Gahero and Kando, just a girl in a simple night robe, but she carried the power of truth. Her body trembled, but her voice did not. "End this now," she said to Gahero, looking into his storm-filled eyes. "Choose who you want to be. The world is watching. Your people are watching. I am watching." The sword in Kando's hand began to shake. The silence stretched. The tension hung in the air like a drawn bow. And then he let it fall. The metal clanged against the stone floor. One by one, the other rebels dropped their weapons too. The fight had left them, not through force, but through something much stronger. Lulami's courage, her strength without violence, had broken their anger. Gahero looked at her, and in that moment, everyone saw it. The chief they once feared had changed, not into someone weak, but someone wise, someone who could now lead with both strength and heart. That night, no blood was spilled. That night, war was stopped by the bravery of a single woman who chose to stand in peace when everyone else reached for violence. Lulami didn't just save herself, she saved them all. And the fortress, once built on fear, began to stand for something greater, hope. From the day Lulami stepped between Gahero and his enemies, everything changed. The fortress, once cold and unwelcoming, now echoed with the sound of life. Gone were the days of fear and intimidation. Gahero, the chief who had once ruled with terror, began to rule with justice, kindness, and strength. The villagers who had lived in silence and fear now saw a man who listened, a leader who cared. Gahero didn't just rebuild his kingdom with bricks and stone, he rebuilt it with compassion. He visited the villages that had suffered under his rule, offering them food, shelter, and the promise of a new future. Slaves were freed, their chains broken, and they were given land to call their own. The poor, once abandoned, now had hope. There was no longer a chief who demanded tribute in fear. There was a leader who offered justice in abundance, and beside him stood Lulami. The once gentle girl who had come into his life like a soft breeze now stood as a queen, strong and graceful. Her love had done what nothing else could, melted Gahero's stone heart and transformed a man of war into a man of peace. Together they ruled, but it was Lulami who was whispered about with admiration. She became known across the land as the girl who taught the beast to love. Songs were sung in her honor. Children were named after her. Her kindness and courage were the talk of every village, a reminder of what love could do. The chief, who had once been a legend of fear and wrath, became a legend of justice and kindness. People came from far and wide to see the once feared Guerrero smile, not from power, but from a place of genuine happiness, beside his queen. His heart, once hardened by tragedy, was now full of warmth, and he was a leader that his people deserved. It was said that even the hardest hearts could melt with a touch of love. Guerrero's story became proof of behind every beast there was a wound, and sometimes healing began with something as simple as a gentle smile. It had been Lulami's soft touch, her unwavering faith in love, that had reached into the fire of Guerrero's past and pulled out the light. And so, in the quiet hills of Obwanda, a kingdom once ruled by fear was now ruled by love, thanks to the courage of one woman who believed that even the darkest hearts could be healed. What an incredible journey we've witnessed today, haven't we? From the cold, fearsome ruler Guerrero to the gentle, loving leader he became, all because of the unwavering love and kindness of one woman, Lulami. Her courage, her ability to see beyond the darkness, and her faith in the power of love has shown us that even the hardest hearts can be touched. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how broken or hardened someone might seem, there's always hope for change, for healing, and for transformation. So, if this story touched your heart, as it did mine, take a moment to reflect on the incredible power of love and kindness in your own life. Let Lulami's spirit inspire you to be that light in someone else's darkness, to bring warmth where there is cold, and to help heal the wounds that others may carry. If you loved this story, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to bring you more powerful tales that will make you believe in the beauty of love, kindness, and transformation. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, just like Guerrero and Lulami, we all have the power to change lives. Stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in the magic of love. See you in the next story.